Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates. It is Watchlist Wednesday. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Good to be
good.
back here, middle of the week.
Yes.
Our favourite time of the week,
Yeah.
Watchlist Wednesday.
Absolutely. The rules are the same. Rules of engagement are the same. One expert, three stocks. We sit back and relax.
That's right. It's a great opportunity to hear about, hear from some experts and hear about some stocks that they're watching. And we've got a international flavour to the stocks today.
An international flavour from one of our returning funds. We've had Nick Cregan on before, and we're now having another portfolio manager from Fairlight Asset Management joining us, and that is Ian Carmichael. Ian, welcome to the show.
You had me panicking thinking you were going to ask me about interest rates there for a second.
I apologise, Ian. I don't know where I got that from, and I'm really worried about the pronunciation of a number of these companies as well throughout the episode. So, but Ian is a portfolio manager at Fairlight Asset Management, and we can't wait for this one because, as we said, we've had Nick on before, and any stocks that you guys talk about are always incredibly interesting and ones that we always get really excited about. So, keen to get cracking with your first stock, and it is Techtronic over in Hong Kong. What is it, and why is it on the watch list?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is all the companies we'll talk about today, they're held in the Fairlight Fund, so we are talking about sort of stock that we are really convicted in. Techtronic is a Hong Kong listed power tools company, so it originally started as a third-party manufacturer for Western brands. But over time, they've moved up the value chain and they've become a brand owner themselves. So the two key brands are Milwaukee, which is the red tools for pros, and then Ryobi, which is for the DIY market. And they're kind of the fluorescent green ones you see in Bunnings. So traditionally, the power tools industry was a reasonable one, but there's no way there wouldn't have been too many people that would call it an exceptional business. There was nothing really to stop customers shopping between brands, depending on on which power tools were on sale. But the industry really has changed a lot in the past, call it 5 years, and that's really been the move to cordless tools. So say you buy your first house, you're excited, you go to Bunnings for the first time, you need a lawnmower. The Ryobi one is a nice design and it's a lovely green colour, so you go with this brand and it comes with it, a battery and a charger. So the next week you go back to Bunnings because you realise actually I need a line trimmer as well. And then you've got a choice. You can either buy the Ryobi line trimmer or you can buy a Makita one. And so you prefer the Makita one, but the problem is the Makita one will actually cost twice as much because you need to buy the Makita battery as well. So you end up buying the Ryobi. And then the next time when you go back to the store for a cordless drill, it's the same decision. You stick with Ryobi because it's cheapest. And again, with cordless saws. And so you're now effectively locked into a power tool ecosystem, and it will always cost you more to leave this ecosystem than it is to stay. And so this degree of consumer lock-in to the power tool industry is new, and Techtronic were the first to really realise its power and sort of drive penetration of cordless tools and sort of bringing people into those ecosystems. So discounting on the first product to get people in, and then once they're in, they're locked in. And the other advantage of it too is that Techtronic now sells a lot of batteries. Batteries is a product they previously didn't sell back in the sort of the petrol days. But today, that's their highest margin product, and the batteries themselves degrade over time because they're consumables and they need to be replaced. We really like the management team at Techtronic. So Joe Garley, he's formerly of Stanley Black & Decker. So that's the main competitor that's listed in the US. Everyone would be familiar with their brand. Joe himself was in the running for the CEO job at Stanley Black & Decker, but he was passed over. At Fairlight, we spent a lot of time looking at the kinds of incentive systems behind and structures behind management teams to understand what are they incentivized for, what are their motivations. And with Joe Garley, you don't really find his motivations in the proxy statement because he's primarily driven by revenge. So he's kind of made it his life's mission to sort of make Stanley Black & Decker regret not appointing him as CEO. And every year he steals incremental market share from the company. So really aligned management team who've done a sensational job. We've held the stock since the inception of the fund 3 years ago. We've trimmed it twice. If you look at a chart, pretty easy to work out that both those times have been a mistake. They benefited from the home improvement boom during COVID. We thought it was going to be pretty difficult to lap those numbers, but the recent results blew us away. 50% growth in sales and profits is exceptional. They've got very good market share in the US and Australia, but they're only just getting started in Europe. So we think that there's quite a few years of growth to come here.
Ian, that's why I love having analysts and managers from Fairlight on, because the way that you tell, like the stocks that you find and what you tell us about them is just fascinating. I think that's the first time we've had a CEO driven by revenge.
Yeah.
But look, it makes a lot of sense. And also the concept of switching costs you don't normally think about with these, sort of consumer goods products. But again, a fascinating business story that's playing out. So that's definitely one to add to the watch list. But unfortunately, we don't have time to keep talking about that. So we'll move on to your second stock on your watch list, which is over in Canada, and that's TMX Group. So what does the company do, and why do you like them?
So TMX is a collection of Canadian stock and derivatives exchanges with around about 65% market share in Canada. So to put this in a local context, the business looks a lot like the ASX here in Australia. The main difference would be that TMX is a lot more nimble and entrepreneurial. So they run a twin exchange system. So they have the Toronto Stock Exchange for the large established businesses, but they have a secondary exchange, which is called the Venture Exchange. And that's really an exchange for smaller and riskier companies. And the reason why this is a successful model is because, like Australia, Canada doesn't have a deep venture capital market. So the exchanges in Australia and Canada have typically been the place where businesses have been able to fund risky ventures. So traditionally in these markets, that meant mining exploration, but increasingly today it means sort of young technology companies as well. If we think about sort of comparing, sort of TMX's metrics versus the ASX, so the ASX has grown sales at around about 2% per annum over the past 5 years, while TMX has grown their sales by around 6% per annum. The ASX hasn't grown operating earnings in 5 years, while over the same period, TMX has compounded its operating earnings about 9% per year. Both have around about a 2.5% dividend yield. So I'd put it back to you guys, Bryce and Alec, based on those metrics. I mean, which one do you think deserves to trade on 35 times earnings, and which one deserves to trade on 20 times? I realise it's a bit of a loaded question. You can probably tell where I'm going.
I think the answer to the question is obvious, and I think we're going to find that it's actually the opposite to what it maybe should be.
That's my view. I mean, I don't necessarily think TMX should trade on 35 times earnings, but I think it definitely deserves a premium to the ASX. It's a little bit of a funny market we have in Australia where franking credits really can drive valuations. You don't see that so much in other parts of the world. And that's one of the reasons why, we at Fairlight, we're sort of international specialists. We like to be able to compare markets against each other and find these relative valuation opportunities.
Well, final stock on your watch list, Ian, is Kakaku over in Japan. And I did pronounce that right, correct?
Perfect.
So let's have a chat about that. Why is it on your watch list, and what's the thesis?
So it's a Japanese consumer internet company. The heritage of the business is in a product review and price comparison site called Kakaku.com. So this property is a huge database of customer reviews of various products. So it's a bit like the database of reviews you see on Amazon or TripAdvisor. That's a mature business, not too interesting. It's good, but not amazing. But the interesting thing about the company is they're really an innovation engine. So they take the cash flows from Kakaku.com and they reinvest them into new consumer internet ideas. So one of those ideas that's become very successful is a business called Tabelog, which can be thought of as the open table in Japan. In Australia, sometimes we've got Dimmy or Fork, these kind of things, where restaurant reviews and booking engines, and effectively almost every restaurant in Japan is kind of on that service with consumer reviews to help guide people where to eat, and you can book, your table in the restaurant directly through the app. Another of the new ideas that the business has that we're quite excited about is an employment classifieds business called Kujinbox. The employment classifieds market in Japan looks very different to Australia. In Australia, we've got Seek, which is a dominant player. In Japan, the demand for labour is a lot higher than the supply of labour, so the classifieds market tends to be much more fragmented around industry verticals. Kujinbox aggregates all these industry verticals into a single site, and that model is proving very successful. So it's still small. It's only 7% of Kakaku's revenues, but it's growing very quickly. And last quarter, they grew users by 40%, ad placements by 80%, and revenue by 90%. So while over a 5-year view, we're really excited by Kujinbox. Over the next 12 to 18 months, it's actually going to be, I think the good news is going to come from Tabelog, which is in the restaurant sector. So Japan started their vaccination program 2 months after Australia, but they've left us in the dust, really. In the next 6 weeks, they will have caught up to the US and Europe in terms of sort of their vaccination rate. And what we've seen in other markets, that basically once people feel it's safe to go out again, there's a real sort of catch up on lost time. And so dining out of house obviously benefits from that, and we think Kakaku will too.
That's a fascinating story there, Ian, and a bit sad about the relative paces of the vaccine rollout. I guess when you think about a company like Kakaku, you mentioned that it's an innovation engine and it's taking a relatively slow growing but established business, using that cash flow to, fund new ventures. When you first added this stock to your portfolio, I imagine there was a lot of uncertainty around the ventures, and it was an exercise in assessing management and weighing up how likely you thought they were to, execute on the vision with really starting new businesses. Can you just, as retail investors, we're often told that assessing management is really important, but it's really hard to do. Can you tell us the process you went through to sort of determine whether you would trust these guys to take that cash flow and start these new businesses and be successful with it?
Yeah, so there's two things that you can do as a sort of a minority investor, even as a sort of a retail investor without access to being able to speak with the company itself. So you can look at sort of what the hierarchy is around the decision making in the company. In the instance of Kakaku, there is a long-term strategic holder that's sort of sat there and holds the chairman position at that company, and they've kind of kept that culture and ethos through the whole holding group. So they're really the custodians there of the culture. So that's a tick. And the second is you look at the track record. And so the great thing about Kakaku is they try a lot of things, but they're very essentially cheap bets to make. It doesn't require a lot of capital to start, sort of a consumer internet type business. And so they start lots of little things. They sort of run competitions within the firm to sort of see who can come up with ideas. They'll fund it very modestly, and then if something's working, then they'll start to put capital behind it. But there's a real rigor at the business about making sure that the overall financial, that they never bet the company on any single one idea. So they've got for a Japanese company, they've got exceptional corporate governance, exceptional capital allocation, and so they've got a 40% return on equity target. They hit it almost every year, and they never kind of make these kind of large bets that can really kind of sink the prospects of the company.
Pretty fascinating there, Ian. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I think if anyone's interested in learning more about what you guys are doing over at Fairlight, firstly go and listen to the podcast that we've done with Nick, and we've also had him on AusBiz, but I would also suggest going and having a look at your website as well. You've got some great info there on how you unpack the universe of small and mid-cap stocks and go through your filtering process as well. So definitely go and check that out if you're interested. A reminder of those stocks. So we had one from Hong Kong, Tektronic, one from Canada, TMX Group, and one from Japan, Kakaku. A great global selection. So thank you very much, Ian. It was great having you on.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Well, that brings us to the end of another Watchlist Wednesday. As I said, they have plenty of info on their website, so head to Fairlight Asset Management to check it out. Or if you'd like to see more of what we're doing, head to equitymates.com or shoot us an email at contact@equitymates.com. But tomorrow, Ren, we're finishing on an interesting note.
We are. We've been tracking this news story around, let's take a step back. Trump and Jeff Bezos had beef. Yes. A lot of beef. And there's been some recent lawsuits from Jeff Bezos's companies, Amazon First and now Blue Origin, relating to some of the decisions that were made while Trump was president. So we're going to unpack that all and talk about what it means for the companies, especially the listed companies involved. So join us same time, same place tomorrow.